welcome to another edition of the Hope Dealers. So, we got another special guest tonight, which we kind of let the cat out the bag last week. But tonight, a young lady who is making new waves in the music of Christian music, you could say. And again, I got to meet her at the Soul Stock where I was up preaching in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania. And just so impressed with her and the way she was reaching the young kids there. And her testimony was just absolutely amazing. I was like, she's got to come to Hope Dealers. Um, you know, we are an addiction ministry, but we sponsor Celebrate Recovery, and we believe in not just drug addiction. We believe in hurts, hangups, and habits. And we want to cover all the bases because it's all demonic oppression, and we want to see people free from it. And so, um, this young lady, she asked some hard questions to the kids there, and she asked them about suicide. Had they thought about suicide? And it broke my heart to see that there were 9, 10-year-old kids raising their hands. Yes. And when she came off that stage, she went over to the merch table and told them, come talk to me. Tell me what's up. And they were lined up, I mean, all the way across the field to see her, to get an autograph, to tell her their stories. And she was there listening. And it touched my heart so much that um, there were people there that are supposed to have been there that never gave her a chance. They never heard her testimony. I don't even think they knew the words to the song, and they just judged her. And kind of my Papa Bear came out in me. And the next day, I kind of lit into it. Well, I didn't kind of. I lit into them, and even at the risk of not being invited back. And so tonight, I want to give her front row to tell her story and her testimony, because there's some of you out there that your kids need to hear her story. There's some of you out there that need to hear this story. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Magdalene Rose. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. And again, you've just touched my heart in so many ways that I can't even explain it. And I just want you to share your story. Let's get the story out there and let people know that Jesus is there to overcome.
Yeah, so I I was privileged enough to grow up in a Christian home, and so that was something that was always kind of fed into my life, that Jesus was real, and that he was just kind of a constant. And so I struggled when I first started doing music because I felt like I didn't have this big coming to Jesus moment. I was like, oh, I don't have an addiction story. I don't have trauma from a childhood thing. Like, how is God supposed to be able to use me? Um, and I started doing music at a really young age and started performing when I was 11 with my sisters. We had a band together.
And what was the name of that?
That was called GFM. It stood for Gold, Frankincense, and Myrrh.
Right.
And there were three gifts to Jesus. And so, since it was three sisters, we're like, oh, we're three gifts to our parents and giving that back to God. And so, we played churches, but we also played just general market venues. And we used it as an opportunity to tell people about Jesus. And that's kind of what I do now, too. But as I started to kind of grow older, I struggled a lot with just body image issues and a lot of mental health. And um, whenever things started to kind of pick up a little bit with the music, we were talking with a lot of kids, a lot of adults, and they were telling us all these heavy stories. And I felt kind of like an imposter because I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have abuse stories. I didn't have a story of coming out of that. And so I was like, who am I to give advice to these people? I don't understand from that level. And so I struggled a lot with kind of an imposter syndrome, and um, kind of led myself into believing a lot of these lies that were from Satan, just to keep me from being used by God. And so I fell into a really bad depression, and just started to have a lot of self-worth issues and self-esteem issues, and I struggled with a really bad eating disorder called anorexia for 2 to 5 years. It's kind of hard to like narrow down like, oh, this is when I was really
Right.
struggling, because it's kind of a process
And
of
God
getting
said, "Oh,
into it,
you
getting
want a
out of it.
testimony? I'm going to give you a testimony."
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't understand kind of how bad it had gotten until I noticed my body was shutting down, and lots of things that don't seem like they're necessary to life were stopping, and I was getting sick, and I was like, I don't know what this is happening. I still don't like the way I look, and I still feel like I need to be giving into these really bad behaviors. And my dad was able to kind of pull me out of that and just had a real conversation with me, and nobody had really talked about it before. And everyone tells you like, oh, you need to eat, like you're looking kind of skinny, and like that was kind of it. But my dad sat me down and he's like, if you don't stop this, you're going to die. Like your body is shutting down, and that's just the course it's going to take. You don't get better from this if you continue this behavior. And so we came to an agreement that I would work on getting better, and if I didn't get better, then I would have to go off to a rehab for people with eating disorders. And doing that scared me enough where I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not going there. And so I worked really hard on just kind of learning how to appreciate my body and identify with being a child of God, and not having to be this person for people online, having to be this person that had it all together. And um, it was kind of a difficult process because I didn't want to get better at first, and I was more comfortable staying in that because I don't know what healthy me looks like. That scares me. And what if
Right.
I don't like her and then I have to stay healthy? Like that's not fair to me. And so I struggled with getting better for a little bit, and then I'd fall back into bad behavior. And
Relapse.
yeah, relapsing just for, and it's just a different kind of relapse. And a lot of times it's hard to put words like that on it because it doesn't feel as bad, but it really is. You're killing yourself in that moment. And um, my husband, who's in the room here now, he wasn't my husband at the time. We were just friends, but he helped me kind of bring God into that healing aspect. And I was trying to do it on my own, and I've always had an issue with control and trying to fix things myself. And he was the one who told me like, hey, are you talking to God about this? Like you need to be, that should be your first thing that you go to.
Just preached on that Wednesday night.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
it's hard because you expect like, oh, it's my problem, so I need to fix this. And so him reminding me of that every day, I bought myself a little like cheap notebook and would just write prayers to God every day, because that was how I would keep myself from like talking to God at night and then falling asleep. I'm like, oh well, I tried and like I fell asleep. It's like no,
Right.
like I'm going to set aside a time. And like I filled up like 3 notebooks, and it finally got to a point where I was better and I was able to kind of talk about it, but it was still like a weird thing. And so we didn't really talk about it. And, I made a video or two that we posted online helping people know that recovery is possible, but it was still kind of this taboo thing where we didn't really want to talk about it because it's weird and makes people uncomfortable. And, but I did struggle with depression still and mental health. And so I had to get medicated for that. And the goal was for me to not have to be on medication long term. I just needed help in that moment. And I became very dependent on it. And even though it was kind of a light dosage, I didn't want to, again, be a healthy version of myself because this was safe. And then GFM, the band that I was playing with my sisters, we decided to put that to a stop in 2022 because we felt like God was calling us different directions, and we didn't feel like that was where God needed us anymore. And that was one of the worst times in my life. And I didn't know what I was supposed to do because I felt like God had called me to do music, and I didn't hear him say that I was done with that. And I knew the only way that I could continue to do music was if I left my family then, because they felt like I was pulling them in different directions. And if I wanted to continue to do music, it would have to be my own then. And I hadn't known anything other than my family. Like, I grew up in a very strict household too. So my sisters were my best friends. My parents were my best friends. I didn't have friends outside of that.
Right.
And so I called my husband's father, and we still, it was like we were kind of dating, not dating, because my parents were really strict, and so like it was kind of strange to tell like where we were at with that. But I called his dad, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like,
Now you're talking about Joseph
yeah,
Rojas.
Joseph Rojas, yeah, from Seventh Day Slumber, because
Okay.
he had taken GFM on a couple tours, and so we were close with their family, and I just felt like God was punishing me and taking away everything that I loved, and but at the same time,
Were you kind of mad at God?
yeah, there was a lot of anger and a lot of just kind of grieving that I was doing, and I had to be reminded again to invite God into that and just to be honest with Him. And I was scared to do that because I was like, I don't want God to strike me down. Like, telling Him I'm angry with Him,
The
like,
fear of God.
yeah, it wasn't just the fear. Like, I was terrified. I was like, I don't want to die. Like,
Right.
and the moment that I just had an honest conversation with God, and there was so much like crying that I did, and I have never been a crying person, but there was nothing else for me to do, and just crying with God and knowing that He was with me and letting Him know that I was angry and I didn't know what to do and that it was His fault because I knew He was taking this from me, and I didn't know what He wanted me to do, but I knew that a leap of faith on my own was required, but I was so mad that that was the case. And it opened up the door for so many things that I never thought were going to be possible. Um, Joseph Rojas and his whole family just immediately opened their doors for me and um, offered me advice and offered to take me on tour. And they're like, if you still want to tour, like, we'll be your band until you figure it out. Like, you can play GFM songs, you can play worship songs, whatever you want to do. Like, we'll figure it out with you if this is where God needs you to be. Like, who are we to say no to that? And it was such a difficult process, and I absolutely needed it to learn to rely on God completely because I didn't have anyone else to turn
Right.
to. And that, like, I had Blaze's family, my husband's family, and the Seventh Day Slumber family, but I didn't, I needed something more than just people at that point. And I couldn't have gotten through that if I didn't have God to hold me and for me to hold on to something like God. Um, and it was a complete like flip of my world. I was still performing, but it was so different from anything that I knew. I was having to learn a lot of things, having to be vulnerable in different ways. And, it was always me and my sisters in interviews and songwriting. And so there's kind of a level of safety you have where you can only get so vulnerable because you have to kind of share it between three people. And then the next thing I knew, like, it was only me on camera.
Spotlight's on you.
And I was like, I don't want people to know anything like that about me. Like, I don't want people to know I struggle. I don't want people to know that I'm not this perfect person I had put online. And then I started to have really bad night terrors because of everything that was going on. And it wasn't just like, oh, I had a bad dream like once a week. Like, it was, I wasn't sleeping for 6 months because every time I would close my eyes there was just death and destruction and the most graphic things you can think of that you would never wish anybody to have to see. And so I was scared to go to sleep. um, and I was super paranoid because I was sleep deprived and I didn't want to tell anybody about that. And I didn't
Just
know,
another
like,
disorder.
yeah. And the only reprieve I would get was if I would have sermons playing in my ears at night. And the second that the sermons turned off, or if my phone died, or if my headphones died, like, the dreams came back immediately. And so I knew it was some sort of demonic oppression, but I didn't know what to do with that because I was like, I don't know how to get rid of that. Like, I've tried talking to God about it, like, it doesn't go away. And um, so I had let people in the bus know, and they were praying for me. They were trying to come up with ideas of how to combat this. And a lady at a show then asked me if there was anything I could have like prayer for. And I hadn't talked to anybody outside of the bus about that. And I was like, listen, I'm going to be real vulnerable with you right now. And just told her everything that had been going on. And she asked if she could lay hands and pray for me because she recently had gotten a word from God that she was supposed to be a healer. And I didn't grow up that way. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll take anything at this point. Like, and she she laid hands on me and she prayed over me and specifically prayed over the spirit of fear and the spirit of demonic oppression that was attacking me, and demanded that it flee. And I didn't have any night terrors after that. And I was
Amen. God
so
is
like,
good.
what in the world? Like, I had never had spiritual healing in that way. And, you hear these stories of like, oh, yeah, that happened. And it's like, oh, it's possible. But when you don't see it in person, it's hard to fully grasp it. And, but yeah, God gave me a miracle last year. That was not even like that long ago. And so we wrote a song about it and have been trying to just meet people where they're at. And there's a lot of people with PTSD who have um, just really related to that song, and not just like war veterans, but people with sexual trauma, people with abuse trauma. They find that they're not alone now, and they're like, nobody talks about this because it's just like nobody cares
A
about
lot
that
of
type
people
of
don't
thing.
understand about demonic oppression. It's
Yeah.
like when she got here tonight, we were talking about, we've been addiction ministry since we started. And uh, we, man, we've preached more in rehabs and things like that than we have anything. And I tell people, so we are a deliverance ministry. And I did not ask for it. I did not seek it out. Like the first time it happened, it freaked me out. I'm up on stage and I'm preaching and in the pulpit, and all of a sudden people are screaming and throwing up and all kinds of stupid stuff's happening. And I'm like, what in the world's going on here? And that's what it was, the world.
Yeah.
And so, we had to train for mass deliverance when it was breaking out all over. And then we also do a thing that's kind of like cleansing stream, and we call it Freedom Workshop, because we also teach people. Okay, we take them through deliverance and renunciations of family curses, soul ties, blood ties, all those things. And we do the renunciations of them. But the Bible tells us once a house is clean, if we don't fill it with something else, seven more is going to come back and make it worse. So what we do is it's just like triggers for addiction. You know, Something could trigger you to go back into anorexia or something like that. We teach people to recognize the trigger so that when that demon's trying to come back, he knows to rebuke him in the name of Jesus and just go ahead and command him to leave.
Yeah.
And it's so much of addiction, depression. We literally we cast out the spirit of anxiety and depression, and in deliverance ministry, sometimes you'll anxiety will be this little spirit. Depression will be this little spirit, and they know they don't have a lot of power individually. So they'll gang up and they'll start working together. And so sometimes the Lord will say, you need to split them two up first. So we'll cast out one. Then sometimes they're both weak, and the Lord will come in and give me the discernment and say, hey, just go and kick them to the curb. Let's just get it over with.
Yeah.
And I know you're telling the truth, because when we do this, we don't do it arrogantly, or we do it boldly. We command the spirits to leave in the name of Jesus. Um, but it's more important that you learn to command them to leave, because you're the host. You're the one they're living in. And so when you command these demons to leave you, they got no choice. They got no choice. But it's that discipleship of teaching them how to keep rebuking them and commanding them to stay away from you.
Mhm.
But that's a beautiful story. I mean, that's a whole beautiful testimony. And people, like I said, it's hurts, habits, and hangups, and PTSD, trauma, things like that. We tell everybody, addiction's not the problem; it's the result of a problem.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that that leads to further addictions.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean,
And you don't nip that in the bud. And that's why, I was saying earlier, we support Celebrate Recovery because they break up into small groups and they deal with those problems. Because you're not going to get over addiction until you deal with what caused you to have to medicate to begin with.
Mhm.
Like you said, the doctors put you on, antidepressants and things like
Yeah.
that. And really, all along, what you needed was freedom
Mhm.
of a demonic oppression.
Yeah, and like now I don't take any medication for anything. Like the days when I do struggle, Blaze's family, they were the first ones to tell me they're like you might feel silly, but you say you cast that demon out in Jesus' name, like, and it's not like you're not just saying, oh yeah, in Jesus' name. Like, no, you have to
No.
mean it.
Yeah.
And
Authority,
yeah,
dominion.
and like not just in your head, you have to say that out loud because they're not in your head. Like they can't hear your thoughts. They can just mess with you. And since Jesus is in you, they can't inhabit you anymore. So
Right.
you have to tell them, like, and not just suggest it. You have to demand that it flees in Jesus' name.
Who he sets free is free indeed.
it's like if you got somebody in your room and you go in there and you're like, excuse me,
Yeah.
do you mind please just leaving? They're not going to leave. But if you go in there and be like, hey, get out,
Yeah.
and you go in there with that authority.
So Kenneth's got a young daughter.
Yep.
And she is, well, I used to say my spiritual granddaughter, but now I just say she's my granddaughter. And I'm hard on her. And I've made her mad a lot of times, but she knows I love her.
Mhm.
Yep.
And that's the main thing. And here lately, she's been going through some stuff. And I was hoping to have her here to meet you, and maybe that'll happen on our next meeting. But I was going, Kenny, you got anything for Magdalene?
Well, I was sitting there listening to her story, and I know you've seen me like raise up. Um, I, I, I was sitting there listening to it, and the one thing that I kept hearing is Jeremiah 29:11. I love that verse. It's, for I know the plans that I have for you, plans to prosper you and give you hope. And, as you were sitting there talking about, the stuff you were going through, not knowing what was going to happen because now you've left your family and you're starting on your own, and, you started doubting yourself, but you never once thought about what the plans the Lord had for you.
Yeah.
The Lord was going to use you with or without a testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And, now you do have a testimony to give, but all along you've had that story that God was going to use you. And, that was what I kept hearing. But I was listening to everything you were saying, and I was like, all I kept hearing in my head is Jeremiah 29:11, like, because
It'll turn your mess into a message.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, if there's a parent out here that's watching and their kids might be suffering with depression, anxiety, maybe they're being bullied, something like that, what advice do you have for that parent?
and I got 3 teenagers, so I'm listening. So
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just talking with them, communicating with them, and letting them know that they're heard and that their pain is real. And I had a friend, she's one of my best friends. She struggled with self harm her entire teenage years, and even now she still struggles with it. And growing up Christian, she felt like she didn't have anybody to talk to her about it. And she's like, nobody wants to talk about it at church, and they just say I'm sinning and they don't help me. And so the biggest thing is just giving them an audience and not just feeding into the behavior, because there's a difference between encouraging and enabling, but definitely giving them a voice, allowing them to feel safe enough to let you know what the root of the issue is. And um, teenagers are hard.
Yeah, they are.
man,
I'm just in my early 20s, and I feel like I'm very like behind on some of the development, and so I feel like I'm still in my teenage years. And it's weird. It's a very turbulent time, and you feel like there's all these expectations you have to live up to, but you have no idea how to do any real things. And so it's hard, and people are mean. People especially with the internet, like it's given so many more mean people a backbone because they can hide behind a screen.
Keyboard warriors.
Exactly. And then if they have that confidence and then they feel a little bit more of it online and they go to school with these kids and they feel like they can now have the confidence to say it in person. And so it's hard to not have community. And I struggle with that because I didn't have a youth group community. We were always kind of the weird family, and so kids didn't want us at the youth group. Like even the youth pastor didn't want us there. And so, even now when I walk into a church, sometimes the churches are like, they don't even want me in the church because I look weird to them.
You're always welcome to this church. I promise you that, because we are the weird ones.
We kind of we feel like the Misfit Island.
Yeah.
It's where all the misfits go, and we tell everybody we're like the Planet Fitness of churches. We're the no judgment zone.
And
everybody here has a past. Everybody here has been through addiction. Everybody here has been incarcerated. Everybody,
except for the youth.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's funny you were talking about community and giving them a voice, because that was one thing that we did with the kids. Pastor Chris brought every single one of the kids up. He told them days in advance, make a list. Tell me what what would make church funner for you? What and it gave them a voice, but all across the board.
That night started a movement of youth in this church just by listening. They want to be heard.
Yep. But all across the board, all of them talked about how much they loved the community, the family feeling here.
Yeah.
And it was funny when you said community, the youth group community. But one thing I do want to address with parents that are watching, it does not matter. And you said yourself, you grew up in a Christian family. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you're in a Christian family or not.
Makes you a bigger target.
It does make you a bigger target. Your children are going to struggle. You may see something, talk to your kids, because you may see something where you're like, well, what is that? And you may start noticing patterns, and don't think just because you go to church every Sunday and every Wednesday that your children are not going to, they can still suffer with depression, anxiety, and all the other stuff that come along with it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the biggest problem today is parents aren't taking time with kids. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of single parents out there that are working all they can just to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. But I got a plaque at my house that says the most important things in life aren't things.
Yeah.
It's the people in your life. And as we said previously with when Joseph was on the show, time is the most valuable thing you've got. You don't know how much you got left. Once it's gone, you can't get it back. You can't buy it back. You can't steal it back. It's gone. Time is gone. And so it's valuable, but that especially applies to your children, because when your children are young, you need to be spending all the time you can with them, because as they get older, they're going to get their friends, and then they're going to quit wanting to spend time with you. They're going to want to spend more time with their friends and other things, and you no longer have an influence over them or in their life.
Or the most important person to them.
Or the most important to them. You start taking a back seat.
Yep.
And so it's extremely important. Guys, I know you're working hard out there. You're spending time and you don't got no life of your own. But, man, you forfeit that when you have kids. You forfeit that life. You forfeit that going to the clubs. You forfeit all that stuff for them kids. And you need to be spending time with them because, I had a pastor tell me one time, if you ain't giving them Jesus, if they don't know Jesus by the time they leave high school, more than likely they won't know him, because when they go off to college, you got Muslims in their ear, you got Buddhists in their ears, you got Hindus in their ears, you got atheists in their ears. And the Bible says, train them up in the way that's good, and they'll come back to it when they get older. And sometimes that don't even work. I mean, like you talking about, you grew up in a church family. That don't make you immune to Satan. That makes you a bigger target.
Yep.
Because sometimes when Satan can't get us, he goes after our kids.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. So y'all church people out there, you might as well just go on no.
Well, that's the hardest thing, because Satan knows how to infiltrate the church now too. And so if it's a kid or if it's a person coming to a church, if they can feel segregated from the church people because they're not religious enough, because they don't live their life a certain way that these people in this church do, and so they shouldn't be in the church. Church hurt happens, and then people don't want to go to church
Right.
anymore, and then they blame God for that, and then they want to turn their back on God because how could God be so hateful to them? And a lot of times it's these
Church
broken
people, the
people
meanest people
hurting
in the
them,
world.
and it's so sad because these people are allowing religion and Satan to infiltrate and to command them instead of listening to God and allowing God to speak through them. And um, I thankfully have had the opportunity to work with a lot of amazing churches who understand that and are willing to just like nip that in the bud as fast as they see it. But it is kind of a growing thing now. Even with me, with people like Seventh Day Slumber, we are out here on the road to minister to people, and that's not even good enough sometimes. And so, you know, I encourage church people, don't let that be something that hinders you from reaching somebody, especially as, people like us are inviting people from recovery groups to come to church. They don't know what church is like, or if they do, they don't know how to do church in a new way
Or they've
like
been church
this.
hurt.
Or they've been
Ain't no
church
hurt like
hurt.
church hurt.
And it's scary or it's uncomfortable. And the last thing they need is somebody who's never gone through an addiction or struggle to tell them how they should be living their life like immediately in this moment. They should be allowing God to intercede for them.
And the other thing is too, so like you grew up in a church family, but you're a little different. So the church don't accept you. Well, now that you're in a church, they know you grew up in a church family. The kids in the world don't accept you. The church don't accept you. So what you got?
Yeah.
And that's why I tell ours, which I'm going to get you a shirt made. All right, we're making up new church youth shirts that says "I identify as a child of God," and I want to get you one of them because that's I just been preaching on this to our youth, and the whole story is you ain't got to please nobody but Jesus. Don't worry about what they think or they think. Worry about what Jesus thinks about you, and if you're making him happy, there's always going to be haters. There's always,
Yeah.
I mean, y'all, when y'all go out, I want y'all to go out. I want you to pull up this young lady's music on Spotify, Magdalene Rose, and listen to it. You're not going to even know it's her half the time. When she has her own genre of music. I used to call it grunge. I don't know if that's what it is or not. What do you call it?
I don't even know what we call it anymore.
It reminds me of Screamo, but I love it.
Yeah,
Like,
it's got Screamo, it's got some of the grunge thing, it's got some rock. We even throw in like trap beats into it and just like the MySpace scene type stuff. Like there's so much just randomness thrown in there.
It's worth a listen.
Yeah,
like, especially if you're younger. Like my grandma ain't gonna like it. I promise you that. But people my age.
Well, even my wife, when we were sitting there, the first thing, because you hear this sweet little voice coming out, and then she goes into what I call the Cookie Monster voice. And my wife's like, oh my God, she's going to destroy her voice. And I'm like, no, she's not. She wouldn't be doing it if she couldn't do it, And it's like a lot of people, I wanted her to have this testimony time before you listen to her music, because if you just went and listened to the music and you're that church person, you probably would say, "Oh God, that's demonic," and it's not. It's telling a story, and that's what people don't understand. It's like the Saturday night I preached. I was opening for Ben Fuller after you had been there, and I just told him, I said, "Ben's got a song on addiction. Me and Caitlin, and I've played that to these guys, and they just cry when they hear it. He's got another song about an old man blowing up his farm because the government was trying to take his land." I said, "But yet y'all showed up to hear that." I'm like, y'all got to understand, God has us go through these lives, and these musicians, they write about their experiences. They write about what's going on in their life. And if you'll take time to listen to the testimony, take time to go back and just look up the words, what are the lyrics to this song, then you might have a different outlook. But when you're being narrow-minded and you're just shutting it down right off the get-go, That is the most judgmental religious thing you can do. And Jesus ain't about the religion, y'all. So get over it. Just get over it. But go look up her music, listen to it, share it with your younger kids, because I'm gonna tell you, the adults might not have liked it, but when them kids ate it up, they was lined up. I mean, lined up to talk to her. Because y'all don't understand, we're living in a jacked up world today. We are living in the most jacked up world, and Jesus is trying to reach the kids right now because he's coming back to meet them in person very soon. Yep. And he's trying to prepare those kids because Jesus loves kids too.
Well, it's like I said with Joseph when he was on the show, and you know, from 40s and 50s music all the way to that song.
Yeah, he weird about that stuff, man. He listens to
my
music.
My genres of music, they stretch across the universe, I promise you. But I use Seventh Day Slumber, Magdalene Rose as a way to bridge the gap between my children and me, and it gives us something to kind of like connect with is the music. And you know, they don't always like everything I listen to. I can, but that the fact that I like rock music before, and my children, they didn't grow up in a church. No, not until I got sober was my daughter ever in a church. And the boys, they've just been going to church the past 2 years. But that worldly rock music that they're used to, I'm able to bridge that gap with Seventh Day Slumber, Magdalene Rose, and Brian Welch's band. I think it's called Life and Death. But I'm able to bridge that with, hey, you like Corn? Well, hey, here's this over here.
I listen to Red and everything under the sun.
But I can use those type of bands to kind of like, even Karen Delight is Christian rap. I can use that to, kind of like, you've heard me say it, backdoor them with Jesus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll bring that Karen Delight in on them, and they're like, man, what is this?
My boys in prison turned me on to Brian T. And I had it all downloaded. I was on my Harley, me and my wife, we're cruising down the road, and we stopped at this red light. And I mean, my bike had a system on it, and we were thumping. And my wife's like, "Look at all these people staring at us. Like, who's these old people listening to this rap music?" I was like, "Yeah, they'd really be staring if they knew it was Christian rap." It don't matter, y'all. It don't matter. Everybody's got an audience. Yep. Everybody's got people they're going to reach. Man, I'm a biker pastor started out. I mean, we're not the biker church no more. God brought me out of that. But, I related to bikers. Not everybody, most people scared of bikers, And when I go up to them and say, "Hey, can I pray for you?" Oh, man, that just blows their mind. There's this bald-headed guy with a goatee and tattoos, and he wants to pray for me. I don't know if I want him to pray for me or not. Yeah. I know you know. But anyway, we're going to get out of here, guys. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and giving people this testimony. Parents, man, y'all listen to this. Y'all share this. Y'all start downloading her music. Let her kids hear it. And they're not going to believe it's Christian music either. They're going to be like, man, I could listen to that. Yep. So, we're here. We're the hope dealers, As we tell everybody, we used to be dope dealers. Now we hope dealers. And it's all because of Jesus Christ. Without him, we'd still be out there doing the same stupid stuff we always did. So just know, Kenny,